session on to this panel on road mapping grounds for electricity transition, experiences across the Atlantic and beyond. The idea is that I don't know why we assume that this is going to be a fast transition, a smooth transition, and a transition, because even people here attending this conference have is are not sure that renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels. I was surprised in a discussion this morning, and so that's something to begin with, that is cheaper, and that in that sense it creates benefit for society, for welfare, and for uh, the economy. But the second issue is that, and well, so first, everyone knows, and this has been overexposed during these sessions, that we're moving fast and faster than ever in any transition in electricity than before. And but I want to point out, and there are enough resources. There is no evident limits for this transition to take place and to do very well for some time. Perhaps land use is an issue, and sooner or later, people are going to say uh, there is need for more density, and then there are solutions that are better than what we have. All right, fair enough. But for the time being, this is good enough, and is no other alternative in the sense of uh, s- uh, the transition. This is The Economist, November 2024. The transition to a carbon neutral world should make countries better off, at least in theory. Many will rely less on fuel imports, and this is what's happening in Europe, yielding big savings, and isolating the economies from swings and hydrocarbon prices. I mean, so this is evident, and well, there's not much that we should move into that. And so, in general, this is true, but what would this do to the markets? And are the markets reasonable to take so much renewables? And that's the issue. That's the big issue. And some of us are not aware that perhaps we have to make major changes to markets so we can do it better. And the technology itself, the engineering itself, it's got to change. And the new engineering is something important. So, and as I mentioned this morning, at the end of the morning, uh, wait, the process has not been smooth. And what happened in the US, in Texas, and in the UK, in the southeast of UK, and Spain and Brazil, some people say, this is a disaster. We shouldn't go on like this, because, and we should stay as it is, because this is going to create lots of problems. And I believe that's something that we have to address. So markets and markets have to be thought through thoroughly, and something that the Brits started doing to introduce renewables perhaps is the uh, beginning of changing, making big changes into energy markets, contracts for difference. That's a new idea that was introduced in 2013. And capacity charges, capacity markets. Uh, that's a different idea. That was not incorporated to begin with. So those two ideas were introduced in 2013, but now the Brits say, well, let's redesign the market so we incorporate better and more securely renewables. And they're talking about moving into 100% renewables by the end of this decade, only 4 years ahead. And that's not going to be an easy job for the UK, and much less for countries like us, because we don't have nuclear power that help us, in that sense. And this, I think, is the key of what they're thinking. This, uh, the process started 2 years ago, and is about to finish. And what should the redesign of the market contain, apart from contracts for difference, because they are sure that contracts for difference have to be in the new markets. And the other thing that they believe is part of the idea is capacity mechanism. These two are, in any case. Should we get rid of the spot market? The answer is no so far, and I don't think they're going to, because they need a mechanism for clearances. But the rest, you have to think what it should contain. All right, so that's the motivation for this, and let's get on with who wants you?
If you could, si puede poner con Duik. Sí, este. Okay. Can I get this? Some time ago, a very cataclysmic title appeared in The Economist. They were really being afraid that the networks will fall apart in some developing countries because of cheap solar coming. And I read the article and I said, wow, this is great. I mean, South Africa is installing like 4 gigawatts of solar a year. Why do they do that? Because the grids don't work there. Coal power plants are not working, but the system is completely under control of coal power plants. Coal lobby is so powerful that there is no place for energy transition in a formal way. So what happened is that cheap solar panels just entered the market, and people who don't get electricity most of the day put solar panels on their roofs. Companies put their solar panels on their roofs. South Africa is a country approximately about Colombia, and they do 4 gigawatts a year. Colombia has like 200 megawatts altogether of solar capacity. So it's orders of magnitude higher. The transition is happening very fast. In the same article, they talk about Pakistan. I already mentioned Pakistan. Pakistan in 24 installed 17 gigawatt of solar panels, and they increased the share of solar electricity from 1% to 25% in one single year. The solar panels just came and they were sold because they were cheaper than not having electricity. So countries which have the biggest problems with electricity supply will do the transition very fast, because the cheapest way to do it is solar panels with batteries. If you want to have a diesel generator at your home, it's noisy, you need to buy fuel, and it's 3 times more expensive than solar batteries. So why would you do that in a country that doesn't have its own oil? So the things are moving very quickly. If we look at Africa, it's exploding in practically half of the African countries. Those are the poorest countries in the world, but the solarization is going fastest. Sierra Leone, have you ever heard of it? Has imported enough solar panels last year to cover 60% of its yearly production. We don't know if it was all installed. We still don't have statistics. They will come in a couple of years. But they basically moved to solar probably in like 1 year. Why solar is so specific? It's cheap and it's getting really cheaper. And there is actually no bottom for solar price. The price only depends, the cost only depends on massification of production. It's scalable. You can put it on your hut, or you can put it on your roof, or you can make a 4 gigawatt plant. It's fast to build. You don't need to wait for connections, for permissions. You just buy it and put it. Growing economies will need power quickly, and solar power can be delivered very quickly. There is a huge overcapacity for production of solar panels. Seasonal insolation variation in Africa is small. So for developing countries in tropical, subtropical areas, it works perfectly. Space is available. There is a lot of space. This is not the case in Europe. But of course, sun doesn't shine 24 hours. So we have a situation like this. Duck curve, Western Australia, it's already happening. During the day, there is an excess of electricity. You can extend this curve. This is already happening a few years before this forecast. In California, they're using batteries. You can see quite a lot of electricity is already coming from batteries. This is the future. Solar during the day and batteries in the evening. The price of batteries is falling precipitously. Lithium batteries are becoming very cheap. And we have new chemistries coming, plenty of them. Sodium batteries are much cheaper, and they're coming. And the production is growing very rapidly. So this is going to solve problems in developing countries very quickly. Another technology that is coming that actually helped to make those batteries very cheap are electric cars. The markets are moving very fast. You know, Europe is now backward compared to developing countries. Places like Vietnam have 40% of their market are electric cars now. Nepal is 70%. Colombia is 10%. So things are moving very, very rapidly, and they will not stop because electric cars are much nicer to drive. I really miss my Tesla when I'm living in South America, but hopefully the things will change very quickly. I can't rent a electric car in Chile. I suppose in Colombia would be difficult, but in a year or two it will come. If we look at countries now, we see that developing countries, the black ones, are actually more advanced in electrification of transport than developed countries. And things are moving incredibly fast in places like, for example, Ethiopia. Let's analyze this case. They banned internal combustion engine cars imports last year. This year, they already had 25. They had 70% of all cars, new cars were electric. Now they banned also imports of parts for assembling internal combustion engine cars in Ethiopia. Why would a poor country do that? They have no oil. So they were importing huge amounts of oil, but they have very cheap electricity in huge amounts. They built a huge hydropower plant, and electricity is practically free of charge now in Ethiopia. So why would not they want to enter the electricity market by starting assembling first electric cars, and then, of course, trying to produce them and sell them to other countries? And it works. It works on an example of a very poor country. So, in my opinion, poor countries cannot afford to drive on petrol. They should go electric very quickly. And my crucial point for this panel is a more problems you have, faster you will do the transition if it makes economic sense. And now it's starting to make economic sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Sylvain, how do you say your name?
Oh, Sylvain is fine. Sylvain was very good.
So this is a Belgium Bolivian. So, Sylvain, please.
No.
Felipe.
Oh,
I can go with it. Okay, so I can have the
sure.
so what I wanna do today is basically play a game. I'm gonna play to be a fossil lobbyist, okay? And then I'm gonna try to fight these three guys right here, and we'll see who can actually win. All right. So if I can go next, this one. Top. There we go. No, back. Okay, so first of all, a little bit of context where we are in Latin America. So what we have today in Latin America is about 60 to 70% renewable electricity, so which is quite good compared to other regions in the world. Hydro, we have Paraguay, close to 100% renewable electricity, basically coming from hydro. Wind, solar in Chile is quite strong, geothermal in some places. Abundant resources, high erosion in Atacama Desert, strong winds in Patagonia, Chilean Patagonia and Argentinian Patagonia, but also in Brazil, maybe Colombia. Practically zero zero fuel for generation from renewables, and air that we can actually breathe in many places. But we need to progress, right? So we need economic development, and probably for economic development, we need fossil fuels. So we need to switch to fossil fuels. But the question is, why should we do this if we have this amazing place? So let's try to see why we should actually move to fossil fuels. First of all, environmental impacts and biodiversity impacts of renewable energy sources. So what we actually see is that solar panels, they use land, so that's actually bad. We cannot maybe grow food. We have lower air and sound pollution. Actually, there was a study in Chilean context in Santiago that the noise pollution in Santiago Centro, which is the capital of Chile, reduced significantly. So that's probably something that we don't want to see, something that's maybe bad. Lower water contamination rates. I don't know why we want to have this. No oil spills and minimal ecosystem disruptions, and so many other, things that we can see from the from the renewable side. But if we see on the fossil side, we have permanent extraction of different fossil fuels. Urban air pollution, we actually have estimates about 7 million premature deaths coming from air related issues. Groundwater contamination or pollution, regular oil spills, ecosystem destructions, and so on. So the question is, why should we move to a fossil fuel future if we can stay in a renewable future, which so far seems to be much better? So can we answer this? I don't know if we have an answer for this, but I'm a lobbyist, so you have to believe me and maybe agree with me that we need to move to fossil fuels. Let me give you a second reason. What about views and landscapes? Many people, I work in Viña del Mar, is on the seaside, and many of my colleagues, they actually say, I don't want to have wind turbines on the seaside because they don't look that good. What about refineries, as we can see in the bottom picture? I don't know if they look that much better than actually wind turbines or solar panels in the hills. What we get from fossil fuels, smokestacks, open pit mines, they actually look like amazing canyons. So why don't we want to have more open pit mines? Oil refineries and permanent installation that would actually last 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. What we actually get with ugly renewables is basically installation that can be dismantled in a couple of years as soon as they no longer actually work. And a reality check in Latin America, we actually export some fuels, but we are a net importer of oil and other liquids. So this is something, a second reason that, we should actually maybe move to more fossil fuels. Let me give you a third reason. Material use and rare earths, okay? Okay, it's true. For the transition, we need, new materials. For solar panels and wind turbines, we maybe need steel, aluminum, copper, although they are very abundant. Silicon, which is the second most abundant element. A small amount of, some other rare materials. The issue is that most of these materials can actually be recycled. And I don't know if this is actually an issue or not. And the main thing here is that for these energy sources, we only need material once. It's an upfront cost. As soon as we build solar panels and wind turbines, we don't use any other material. They are installed somewhere and they function for 20, 25, 30 years. But in the fossil fuel industry, what we actually see is a continuous extraction forever. For every megawatt hour of electricity that we produce with coal, gas, oil, we need to extract that megawatt hour also of fossil fuels. So this is a continuous extraction, not only an upfront extraction that we actually get from renewable sources. To get this fuel, we need to actually wait for 300 million plus years. They might deplete at some point, but let's move to fossil fuels. Okay, they can deplete, but we can still move to fossil fuels. We need drilling equipment, who also uses steel, rare metals, and many other things. And as I mentioned before, we are an imported continent. We a net importer continent, and we cannot recycle whatever we burn. So we burn coal, we burn oil, we burn gas, and it's lost. Okay, while rare materials we can recycle them. Maybe not 100%, but we can actually make a better use as a second life product. Let me give you a fourth reason why we should actually move to fossil fuel industry. The cost of energy, levelized cost of energy. Solar PV, $20 to $40 per megawatt hour, wind, $30 to $50, natural gas, $80 to $150. It's much more expensive to use fossil fuels compared to renewables in Latin America. We have upfront costs in renewables, which is, we know that, but then the fuel cost is zero or practically zero. We don't pay for that. In fossil fuels, we have price volatility. We heard this morning all the geopolitical issues that we are facing today. Brian also mentioned what happened in 2022. So we can actually see that, we don't face these issues with renewables. I don't know if you saw also the news, a couple of, I think it was yesterday or 2 days before, the social cost of carbon was updated after the cost on biodiversity and ocean was actually considered in the accountability for the social cost of carbon. So this is called the blue social cost of carbon now, and it was actually proven or shown to be twice, basically the impact of an additional ton of CO2 is twice of what we were usually seeing as soon as we consider the impact on biodiversity and also on the oceans. But on the renewable side, we don't have these geopolitical issues, we don't have price volatilities, and we don't have to pay for fuel costs. So again, why should we transition to fossil fuels if we have all these many benefits? So last reason, just to be consistent, emissions. So renewables are bad for the environment. Let's see why they are bad for the environment. Much more lower life cycle emissions, 10 to 15 grams per CO2 equivalent. Carbon intensity in Latin region is also very low. Declining trajectories. We are very aligned, at least in the Chilean context, with the Paris Agreement. We're almost sufficient and better air quality improvements. But on the progressive fossil fuel path, what we actually get is much more higher amount of gram per of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour, locking effects for 30, 40 or plus years, stranded assets, and plus 3 or 4 Celsius degree by 2100 if we still stick or rely on fossil fuels. and of course respiratory or respiratory basically issues. So again, many reasons to move to a fossil future. What we should actually do in the Latin American context, we need to decarbonize transport from using renewable energy. Never mentioned electric vehicles. If we can have solar panels, why not? Just an example. I live in Santiago, but I work in Viña del Mar. It's 100 kilometers away, 120 kilometers away. I was spending close to $800 per month in gas. Now I have solar panels in my house. I have an electric vehicle, and with the amount of money that I'm going to save, I'm going to pay the solar panels in less than a year. So excellent economics in my particular case. Instead of gasoline. With how much I save on gasoline with the solar panels plus the electric vehicle, I pay the solar panels in less than a year. Industry, heavy sectors, we need hydrogen maybe or other e-fuels. Agriculture, fishing in the context of Latin America, we can also electrify that very easily. Heating and cooling, we heard that from Brian this morning. So there are big opportunities from the Latin American perspective, particularly looking into renewable advantages. So that's basically myths versus reality. This is what I explained. Renewables are not expensive. Renewables need rare materials, but yes, it's true, fossil fuels are not much better. Renewables do not damage landscape, while fossil fuels, they do. And we need baseload fossil plants, but we can actually replace that with storage plus interconnection plus flexible demand and many, many others. So we need to transition to renewables as soon as possible. And last, we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation who can actually do something to stop. So thank you so much.
Who's next? Surprise.
I won. Yes, that's a good idea. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the European situation. So this is just sort of to recap for those who are not following it. So the European electricity supply has more than half renewables in it, and in the last decade or so, 60% reduction in coal to be phased out in many countries before 2030. And as you see on this graph, solar is highlighted as going beyond coal generation, and you can see above that the wind power part is quite significant as well. You also see the top line, which is nuclear, and you can see a huge decline also in the nuclear production. We can see that the nuclear power plants are aging in Europe, and not a lot are being built. So we'll see a huge decline in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So we need to replace that with something else. On the right side there, you see the generation mix, and you can see how much the renewables are part and how much coal is actually squeezed out. If we look at the changes in generation over the last decade or so, we can see that this decrease in both coal and nuclear has been more than outweighed from wind power and PV. There's been a slight decrease in the consumption as well. If you look more closely into this, you can also see that there are some structural changes going on, where natural gas is also being decreased quite significantly over the last period. But this is over the 10-year period, so it's a little more nuanced than what you see here. On these graphs here, you see wind power
and solar power represented. So in the middle one here is the added capacity each year. So we have added around 80 gigawatts or more solar PV and wind power in the last 2-3 years, and it's been increasing. You also see that there was a year where it didn't go so well, so more was actually dismantled than built. This was a Corona year, of course. So the question is, what are the plans for the future? Well, down here you see a projection, and you can see that it's anticipated that the installments will still increase of both offshore wind, which is a top one, and the lower one is onshore wind. Oops. We also have some declarations actually on the offshore wind part, where the plan is to have quite significant amounts of offshore wind in the future. Of course, this is before the current geopolitical crisis, but my feeling would be that the geopolitical situation will increase the focus on actually doing quite a lot more on this. Maybe not more than what was planned pre the geopolitical crisis, but at least keeping the focus on this self-sufficiency, having this self-sufficiency focus. So there's really a high increase in the renewables, and this is also to do with the European target on 55% reduction of greenhouse gases in 2030. If we just look briefly at the market design, you can see we have quite a lot of markets in Europe. This represents all the clearing areas in the spot market, and you can see in some countries there are more markets, and in some countries it's a rather large market. So, for example, France, Germany, Spain is one market. Actually, Germany and Luxembourg are together, but Sweden and Norway has several markets within them. In Denmark, we also have 2 markets. Of course, you should have market division if you have a bottleneck between different areas, so you're able to represent more what is actually going on. As everybody, I guess, knows, you have this merit order clearing mechanism where wind and PV is coming in with zero marginal prices. Then we have nuclear power, and at the end out here it's typically gas in a European situation. Now, this has been debated quite a lot. So during the energy crisis, our electricity prices were increasing quite significantly. We had a double impact, you could say, because in France they had not been maintaining the nuclear power plants during the COVID crisis, and that meant that during the first year or two of the Ukrainian war, half of the French nuclear power plants were actually shut down, and that was also one other reason for that was that there was a drought in Europe, which meant that you could not cool the nuclear power plants. It actually meant that normally you have a big flow of electricity from France to all of the surrounding countries, because France has structurally more nuclear power than you can actually have on your own. And when they then shut down, it had to activate quite a lot of natural gas power plants in the surrounding markets, which meant that, of course, the prices went up even further, which was not a good idea. So there was a debate: should we keep this marginal prices? Should we not? And I guess for everybody here, it's clear that even if we abolish the market price mechanism in the spot market, we still need a system to prioritize and make it work second by second. Luckily, it has not succeeded yet to change this, and actually we have gone from the hourly market to a quarter market right now, and we have expanded and joined the system. So now 25 countries are in a quarter of an hour market clearing system. And we don't have a lot of experience yet. It started on January 1st. What we can see is that the up regulation and down regulation prices are a lot higher than was expected. It was expected that would be lower. My anticipation would be that the market players have to get used to this new situation. And I think in half a year, we'll know much more about what the real price is. But right now, we're paying more for the integration than we were before, which is, of course, not a good idea. In combination with this, we need a capacity mechanism to support power plants, because there will be hours where you will not have renewables in the system and where we need this. And as I said in my lecture, 5 to 15% of the time in the future, and of course until we get to that future a lot more, we need these power plants. In addition, we need a financial market or a PPA system or a CFD mechanism to support the installment of the renewables. So there are different market structures that are needed, and they're different from onshore wind and PV to offshore wind, of course. Just a few words about the Danish situation, because I wanted to give you an example of what is done there. So here you see the wind power and PV is very dominant. The blue one is actually bioenergy. I think that is much too large, so it has to be removed or decreased to 1/3 of what it is. And then we have very little coal and natural gas at the bottom there. So can you go to the, let's see. So I just wanted to show you live what the oh, you have to go to the browser. I'm sorry. No, he does not. But we talked beforehand. Oh, we need help from you. He needs to change to the link that I sent to him.
There is a link.
Oh yeah, here we go. So this is just to show you what's going on right now, and we handle more than 65% renewables in the system. And right now you can see we have a demand of around 5,400 megawatts, and we're actually importing quite a lot from the surrounding countries. More than half is imported right now. And this is because we have very, very low wind power production, and of course not any PV. At the moment in Denmark, it's 12:30 or 1:00 in the AM in the night. And we have probably a situation with very low wind power where we then import. It's also a little warmer, which means that it's not profitable to produce the heat on the CHP plants. As you can see, we're very well connected. So there's a lot of things you cannot necessarily use this as a model for. If we were not well connected, we could have maybe 50% renewables, but we are well connected, so we can have 65. If the surrounding countries have 65, it is not going to be sustainable. Can you go back to the slides? Yeah, so as I said before, one of the next steps is this. So you saw that the demand right now was 5,400 megawatts, which is 5.4 gigawatts. And here, if we had a lot of wind power in this situation, we would be able to activate these electric boilers and heat pumps so that we could have an extra 2 gigawatts of consumption if the wind power was there. If the wind power was there, the prices would be very low. That is given. This is just an example of a combined heat and power plant. And in this combined heat and power plant, this is from yesterday. You have some CHP plants, so they're producing because the electricity prices are high. They also have a gas boiler, and they needed to operate that because of the heat consumption. In the bottom there, you see the red line. That is the thermal storage. And right now, the thermal storage is rather low, probably because it's cold, so there's a lot of consumption. So they need to also produce a lot. In this situation, they are also using the heat pump quite a lot. So you can see here the darker green is the heat pump, and then you can see there's a few hours where they are actually winning the bids on the electricity market and using the CHPs as combined heat and power. So, thank you.
So, Sylvie.
Okay, so yeah, I wanted to come back actually to one of the points that Brian raised during his keynote in the morning. I don't know if you remember, but he said at some point that the levelized cost of electricity for renewables was actually much higher than the integration cost, so that the integration costs were negligible. And that actually is quite an interesting question. It's heavily debated. And I would like to present you work that we are actually doing right now. So these results are not published yet, where we try to quantify these integration costs. So you recognize here maybe the slide that Brian presented. So that's the laser levelized cost of energy. I'm not coming back to it, but just to remind you that this shows that basically renewables are the cheapest option for electricity generation, right? Okay, that's an example. Another example, that's a paper from 2 years ago in Nature Communications, and this shows the cheapest way of producing 1 kilowatt hour of electricity around the world. Blue is for wind, and solar is this reddish area. So basically, the projection from this paper is that from 2020 to 2030, we will switch from wind to solar PV as the cheapest source. That's just an example. There are some results that I find a bit strange. For example, this nuclear here as the cheapest in Russia. That's something that I don't really fully understand. But I just want to show this as an example. And whenever you have these kind of results, you have all the fossil fuel lobbyists coming and saying, you cannot look at the levelized cost of electricity, of energy, because it's a bad metrics. It doesn't take into account the variations and the intermittency of renewables. That's you see that all the time. And I put here a few examples. Sorry, can you? Yeah. Yeah. So these are a few examples from social media, from the press, basically saying that LCOE is not a good metrics. You cannot use LCOE. This is these are false results, and so on and so on. Yeah, and so that's really what motivated this study. We want to put a number on this and see at the end what is the cost of integrating these renewables, and is it big compared to the LCOE. That's the curve that Navan already showed, so not coming back to it. Just that's the curve is actually the residual load, so the load minus the renewable generation. You have this low area here, and the idea is that this curve translates in a curve that is kind of similar in terms of market price. That makes sense. So this is an example of market price in Germany. Okay, it doesn't look like a duck very much anymore, but you still see this area with very low prices right here when there is a lot of sun. And in that case, you also see that the prices are highly negative. Okay. So what that means is that in this particular example, in Germany, solar PV was producing a lot, but it was producing at negative price. So if solar PV is exposed to the market prices, it's actually losing money. It's not what happens in reality, but if the market was perfect, if we had an energy-only market, then that's what would happen, and solar PV would be losing a lot of money. And this gap in terms of what could you earn if there was not such cannibalization effect, that's what it's called, and what you actually get is called the profiling cost. Okay? So what people are saying, and I kind of agree with it, is that on top of the LCOE, we should add this part here, which is the profiling cost. So the cost, the amount of money that you cannot make because all the PV is producing at the same time, and therefore the market price is lower. Okay, and then on top of that, you also need to add the balancing cost. So these are the ancillary markets, the reserves, and so on. Take into account the fact that there is more forecast error, for example. And then you also have to take into account the grid costs that are needed to transport the electricity and so on. And so all these up here, they can be called the integration costs. That's what we want to calculate. There is a lot of work that is being done to calculate this, but in my opinion, these work are not satisfactory at all, because what they really do is they take the LCOE and then they really try to use a market model to calculate the profiling cost and add them on top of the LCOE. And this gives results that are quite big, actually, in terms of integration. And in that work, what we want to do is to really use a model and calculate the overall system cost and try to attribute it to each of the renewable technology. I will show you how we do that. So we start, I will go fast on this part because I don't have much time, but we start from a European model. It's a well-known model, it's called PipeSci Europe. The big advantage of this model is not better than any other model, but it has a huge ecosystem of libraries that give you a lot of data in terms of grids, industrial sector, and so on. That's our model right here in the middle. We have to feed it with a lot of data, and among others, the data regarding the renewables, regarding the time series of solar generation, wind generation, and so on. So that's what we are doing. Let's say this is the standard run of PipeSci Europe. But then we want to know what is the integration cost of, for example, solar. And to do that, we will assume that instead of being non-dispatchable, solar PV becomes fully dispatchable in the year. Okay, so we constrain the total generation during the year, but the model can use it whenever it wants. So that's what we are doing here. And then it's very small, but it gives you this kind of plot. So in yellow, we have the original time series, and in black, that's when the model would like to use solar PV. That's for 1 year, and this is for 1 day, or for 1 week, maybe, I don't know. So we do that for solar, we do that for onshore wind, we do that for offshore wind, and we do that for all the renewables combined. That's this one. And then we also do it here for nuclear, because actually nuclear is a very inflexible power generation technology, which means that it doesn't match exactly the demand, and it also has an integration cost. So we also calculate this cost for nuclear, sorry. So the integration cost, how do we define them? We calculate the total cost of the system, the reference system. We decrease it by the total cost of the system where we flexibilize the solar, the wind, or the renewables. And then we divide by the generation. Can you come back? Okay. And these integration costs are the ones that should be added to the levelized cost of electricity. Okay, so that's the, I hope that you get more. I had to go fast, but I hope that you get the idea. And then we apply it to a scenario that goes to net zero by 2050. This is an ongoing work, so we've only done it for 5 countries, but we will present the results for the whole Europe. Yeah, and these are the scenarios, but basically the important is that by 2050 we are net zero. And these are the results. So this is the integration cost for solar PV. It ranges from 25 euros per megawatt hour in 2030 and up to about 50. Okay, interesting. So it's about the same order of magnitude, a bit less than the LCOE of PV. Then we look at wind, and we already see something interesting here. There is more wind in 2050 than in 2040, but we see that the integration cost of wind is actually decreasing from 2050 to 2040. Why is that? That's because wind is actually benefiting from the flexibility that is imposed by more solar in 2050. Right? So you see there is a complementarity effect there. You see the same kind of thing for offshore wind. And then what is even more interesting is that when we calculate the integration cost, not for the individual renewable technologies, but for all of them, then we see that it's much lower, it's about 20 euros in 2050. So because of this complementarity in the generation of these different technologies, you can really decrease the integration cost. And that's what people and what the other methods usually don't see, this complementarity. And then interestingly, the integration cost of nuclear are also non-negligible, and they are a bit less, but the same order of magnitude. We can also look a bit deeper into that. I will not enter into the details, but you can split the integration cost into grid cost, flexible technology, so that's basically storage, and then backup capacity in red. Yeah, and you also see that the levelized cost of nuclear is much higher than the other technologies. That's because the capex of nuclear is extremely high, especially in Europe. It might not be true in China, but in Europe it's very high. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to show, that we can compute the integration cost, but it's impossible to do it at the system level. And when you do it at the system level, they are not so high. That's about 20 euros per megawatt hour, and that's really a reasonable price when you compare it to the LCOE. Thank you.
All right. So we got an idea of basically that this is probably a success story in terms of how much is going to be like, how much integration of renewables will be like for some time. And now we're bringing some issues, the cost of integrating renewables. But what is more challenging is to think of ahead, 10 years ahead, not by 2050, because it's abstract and there are too many things going. In terms of companies, what are the companies that are going to be there? What is it going to be like if so much rooftop solar will be in place in terms of distribution systems? How reliable is this going to be? Will governments try to stop this happening because of the mess that may come up with this happening? So this is an open question for the four of you. 2035, and cars, vehicles, creating problems as well to the system.
Well, if you look from that point of view, from the local point of view, in many places there are already problems. The voltage problem, which is typically happening because there is reverse flow of electricity from low tension to medium tension, and you don't have enough of reactive power in the local grid in order to regulate, to control the voltage. But there are technical solutions for that. What we are expecting that soon regulators and countries will ask from PVs, from inverters to start being grid forming. That means reducing the active power you're producing and converting it to reactive power. That's one approach. I'm afraid that most of regulators and countries would prefer more batteries because this is what network operators like, because then it doesn't touch their business, which is in thermal power plants. So it's a kind of subsidy for thermal power plants, in my opinion. But in the end, we will need quite a lot of batteries anyway. So maybe that way is also not so bad. But the critical thing, we have to also push for time of use tariffs, so that people pay the electricity depending on the part of the day, so that the consumption starts turning according to the supply of energy. Because significant part of your consumption can be moved if you have electric car, if you have heating, if you have hot water supply. These things can be moved relatively cheaply by using heat storage or car battery. So there are solutions, technical solutions to that problem. It's just a question when the governments and regulators decide to move on them.
Yeah, just one. Yes, just want to add. I fully agree with.
But what to you especially?
Uh-huh.
Are the Chilean government or the Chileans wrong for what they're doing because of the blackout? You know, as part of this.
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, the blackout wasn't due to increase of renewable energy. It was just a transmission line, which, by the way, was charging twice the
Isa.
cost for like 10 years. So now they're actually giving money back to Chilean consumers. So it has nothing to do with renewable energy. It was an issue with the transmission line in the Atacama Desert. What you said in the morning, let's not blame renewable for technical other technical issues. On the other side, your first question, I fully agree with Neven, but there is at least in the Chilean context, something that we need to consider. And this is a study that we did on the integration of electric vehicles in Santiago, the capital area. And of course, smart charging is much better, but it doesn't come without the cost of improving capacity in the distribution system. That's at least in the Chilean context, and Santiago, which is the biggest city, something that if we don't basically take into account that we need to increase or improve the distribution system, is something that's not gonna work. We have a flat price, electricity price, so we won't have this smart charging for some time. Although there are new policies now, and the long-term energy planning of Chile is actually looking into at least having dynamic prices during the day, but at least 3. So low, medium, high in different hours. But if we go down that way, we need to improve the distribution systems. And in that way, I also see maybe a business opportunity for demand aggregators or big parking lots that can actually park electric vehicles for hours of the day, aggregate batteries, and not basically think maybe at individual use in houses, but think in terms of new business opportunities that can actually make a better use of collective electric vehicles functioning as a large battery storage.
Brian, apart from that, I don't know if I misunderstood what you said in this morning. In a way, I reflect on that, and perhaps you're saying that you are not going to have more auctions for solar electricity. If
No.
that's correct, what would be the limit? Or you would leave it to the market, and you would leave for individuals to put solar panels, and how would you make some sort of control on the expansion of the system?
Yeah, so let's dive into some of those issues. It's really complicated, but just to touch upon the battery debate there and the PV, I think it's very important to understand that when we have the PV, there will be a need for those batteries due to exactly what Neven said. But and it's very clear, if you, for example, have a data center and there's a cloud coming, then you need the battery. And if we don't take care of that. We can put all of the power electronics on the PV. We still need something like that in some cases. The DSOs have that job, in my opinion. If we look 30 years or 10 years ahead, which is really what you asked, I think there's a major challenge that PV is sort of out competing business cases of a lot of other technologies, and we have to learn how to deal with this. And I think Sylvian, you had this nice study where I would probably not word it in this exactly same way as you do, but the PV that has very high cost, as I understood it, it's based on that you only have PV in the system, which is completely unrealistic somehow. But from a theoretical point of view, if you have that, it's going to be expensive. You can look at many studies that say you have PV, then you have storage. Yeah, but if you have an imagination to combine PV with other things than a battery, for example, wind power or some other flexible storage options, you will not have that scenario. So that is the extreme, you could say. But I think there's a risk that solar PV will cannibalize an investment in wind power and other technologies that you may want. On the demand side, there's a huge need to understand two things. If we have, in a colder climates than this, a full electrification without a smart metering system with good price signals, this is going to be very, very expensive because people need to understand this. Also, those who have electric vehicles, they need to understand it. Not just because we need the generation to go on, but also because we need the capacity in the grid to handle this. And there are many areas. If everybody has a Tesla like Nevin, and it's lets a finger in the distribution net, a grid that has all of those electric vehicles, and they turn on the heating, we can't invest ourselves out of that. We need the price signals for that. So I think the price signals is really something we need. So I think the PV on the production side is a little of large challenge, and then some of these new flexible demands that can create a lot of problems if we cook all of our food while we charge our vehicles. Solar PV and onshore wind we are able to put up without any subsidies, and I think that the role of the government or municipalities is to identify areas where that can be done on commercial terms. And if there are no commercial terms for the actors, if they don't believe it's bankable, then the market is working. And there's a lot of complaints in the Danish system, for example, that, oh, well, all of the renewables are falling, offshore wind is falling and it's not happening. And look, the market is working. That's my opinion. The market is working. Just a few numbers. So some of you may remember I said the peak was like, I think 6 gigawatts or something like that, mostly occurring in the winter time. So if you take 2/3 of that, that's on the Western market, electricity market. So probably there you have a peak of 4,000 megawatt hours. In that system, the Western Danish system, there's 5,000 megawatts of wind and PV on top. Then you make a tender for 3 gigawatts of offshore wind on top of 5 gigawatts of wind on top of probably around 2.5 gigawatts of solar. It doesn't require an economist to understand that that's risky business and that it's hard to make people invest billions in offshore wind in that case. Another problem. When you have 3 gigawatts, and I'm sitting here, I want to invest in one of them. But you're going to invest in one, or aren't you? Are you or aren't you? I don't know, but I have to have a business case. I have to go to the bank, but I don't know if you're investing. And it's already a saturated market. I'm not talking against renewables. I'm just saying we have to understand that if we want a market, we also must accept that the mechanism is that we reach the limit. there have been public plans in Denmark that a certain commissioner now was part of making, where they said they wanted to quadruple the onshore renewables in the Danish system, which meant something around 20 gigawatts in 2030. Nobody probably talked to any technicians having that kind of target, you know. And now, of course, it's a disaster because it's not happening. The disaster is that nobody understood that it's too much.
I want to try to see if someone from the audience have some questions, and we can initiate a debate, a broader debate. Someone has a question or challenge? Yeah, please.
Thanks everyone for the contributions. I fully agree with all of you. I also have been working on the energy transition for the last 15 years. How do we deal with green grabbing for Latin America? So we have been talking about technical things, economic issues. We have learned a lot from the transition in Europe. Some colleagues of mine put some numbers together, and actually the ownership of installations in Brazil are like 70-something% owned by international investors, and more than 90% of the photovoltaic installations are also owned by international investors. That means several thousands of kilometers of land that are owned actually by someone outside of Brazil. And I can imagine the situation replicates a lot in Latin America. So basically, it depends with which kind of person you talk. This could be considered some sort of neo-colonialization. And I just wonder if you have made any thoughts on how to prevent this for the Latin American context. The quoted term is green grabbing, is how they call it. So yeah, any thoughts?
Well, basically, you have a choice between doing transition in a fast and economic way, or building local capacity and doing it slowly and more expensive. So as long as if you have sovereignty, you can control foreign investment. And in my opinion, it's better to do it cheaply and quickly using knowledge which is foreigner. But of course, this is a choice of individual country. But let's look at the land issue. Let's say we are producing biofuels on land. And okay, it's Brazilian 8% efficiency of photosynthesis, and then 50% efficiency of converting biomass into bioethanol. So we are now at 4%. And then there is 20% efficiency of internal combustion engine. So that is 1% efficiency. If we plant solar panels on that land, we have 20% efficiency, and electric cars are running at 80% efficiency. So we are at 16% efficiency. So it's 16 times more efficient to put solar panels and run on electric cars than to produce bioethanol and run it in internal combustion engine. So yes, there is a choice, but why not use foreign capital and knowledge to move it faster? Or you can, of course, decide to do it slowly, locally, more expensively. That's your choice. But what I've seen in Latin America driving around, there's so much land in Patagonia. You can not only cover all your needs, but you can export methanol and ammonia to Europe and cover most of European needs. And there will be no problem because there are only guanacos there living. I've driven 4,500 kilometers in southern Chile and southern Patagonia just before coming to here. It's beautiful, but it's empty.
And the year before, the Atacama Desert,
And the year before Atacama,
which is plenty of empty land.
empty.
And I also believe in markets. So let the most competitive alternative wins. So we have in Chile a very, I would say, for the last 20 years, a prosperous economy, mainly driven by mining industry, copper. We are probably the largest or second largest copper producer worldwide, but we have Codelco. I don't know if you know Codelco. Codelco is a national copper company. So it's the biggest national-owned or state-owned mining company in Chile, producing copper, and it's the only company in Chile that is bankrupt. But we are the biggest copper producer in the world. So who is producing the copper? Private investors. And those private investors are producing copper, exporting copper, and Chile is still benefiting from taxes that they paid and stay in Chile, for which we can use to electrify the economy, improve highways, improve healthcare, education, and so many other things. So if there is someone who knows how to do it better, why not let him do it better, cheaper in Chile, and then we can learn, and maybe we can have better, state-owned companies, and don't worry about these kind of issues. But let the market win. That would be my answer.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a huge need to enable citizens to actually engage in this, and so and it's like it's not black and white or either or. It's a combination. And micro loans for those who are paying quite a lot for their electricity bill, or some kind of community-based systems where you can have a battery together with a solar PV or whatever. It is an enabler for society, and you can take any society and you can do the math. So if you have a village or a city or a country, you can go and calculate how much more efficient a loan would be compared to the amount of money you spend on fossil fuels. And you can make that balance of payment for a region, like never had the case of Ethiopia. If you make the calculation for the case of Ethiopia, then I would suspect that the loan, if it's foreign capital that has done this, to pay off the loan is much less a problem for Ethiopia than the running cost of having the import of all of those fossil fuels. So I think it's an important focus to have, and to have an equity focus on who has access to what. And I can also see that there are some policies that sort of go over the head of citizens who are not able to make investments. You can see it with EVs. So you are bragging about how much money you save, but you can go and have a loan because you're an affluent man compared to many others. So of course there's a social policy dimension here, but it doesn't mean that everything is a bad idea. In my opinion, actually, this is a rather underestimated element. The balance of payment effect, I believe, in the Danish system is one of the reasons that the economy is very, very good compared to the 70s, where billions were spent on Arab oil, to today, where it's basically nothing. So I think that's really important to have that in the externality cost of all of these things.
Just a quick follow-up on that. If you can pay, yes, you can do it. But then it also depends on how policy frameworks developed by countries or even private companies create business models that actually allow consumers to put rooftop PV or electric vehicles. If you, at least in the Chilean case, there is this big company called Copec, who is actually installing solar or rooftop PV. If you can pay in advance, you pay. If not, the upfront cost is literally zero. You basically put rooftop PV with Copec, one of the main fossil companies in Chile, and you pay every month your electricity bill as you pay normally, until you pay off the solar panel. So even if you don't have the upfront cost or capital to invest, smart policies, smart policy frameworks or business model can actually do the job.
I will come back to a previous question, also linked to this EV deployment. We did a study a few years back where we simulated the deployment of PV cars throughout Europe. So saying all the cars in Europe are converted to EVs, what happens? And so basically what we see is that the electricity consumption increases by 20-25%. Okay, interesting. That seems manageable. But the peak power consumption increases by 50%, so much more than the average, which means that electrifying is a good solution and we need to go for it, but we also need to flexibilize, I don't know how to say that, afterwards. And then when we do that, when we implement smart charging, then the increase in the peak consumption is not 50% anymore, but it gets to the same average, 20-25%. So that's something we really need to care about. And then second thing, to enable this is we can rely on the markets and so on. I partly agree, but we still need some central planning, especially for the grid deployment. At the moment in Europe, we have 1,700 gigawatts, it's huge, of renewable capacity waiting for the right to be connected to the grid. The grid are not sufficient to absorb all this. Even batteries in Belgium cannot connect. They have to wait for the grid reinforcement. It takes time, it takes years to develop the grid. That's true for the transmission grid. That's also true for the distribution grid. We like home owners are installing PV panels on their roof, but then they disconnect 1-2 hours per day because the voltage is too high. And so these are real challenges that need to be tackled at the central level, and we need to do it fast and do it in a way that politicians are not used to do. It's like anticipating for the future. And that's something that I think is a real challenge.
Brad.
Yeah, this is a very good point, Sylvian. I don't know if you remember the map I showed you about where to invest and where to not invest. So where do you have renewables already, a lot, a surplus, and where have you too little? So this grid problem has to be helped also by avoiding the grid problem to happen. And I think there's a mechanism where you can do that by planning PVs the right places, or for example, there's a mechanism where you can put demands in the right places. But there's also another mechanism, which I think is a big struggle for the DSOs and TSOs, is to create a market signal for when it's a good idea to use electricity, when do you have the bandwidth, and when do we not have the bandwidth. In the Danish case, we have introduced now a very low tariff at night, a medium tariff, and then a high tariff in the cooking hours, you would say, from 5 to 8 o'clock, which is very high. So to try and induce that, in effect, people will still cook in that time, but they will not charge the EV. So, and I'm in the small capital DSO board actually, and we try to observe what is going on. So this price signal has actually moved so that some of the peaks are happening in the night instead of during that, which is a good thing because it shows that people are doing it. Of course, again, this requires a smart meter. And actually, what I'm trying to fight in that company is that it's not so static, this price signal. So we need to have a dynamic price signals for the spot market and the capacity. Now, this is very advanced and very hard to do in reality. But I bet that within the 10 years that we were asked about, this is going to happen.
Final question.
Thank you very much for very interesting discussion. My name is Takuro Kobashi from Tohoku University in Japan. And in Japan, we have a lot of earthquakes and typhoon, and also Fukushima, disaster, and from that point, government is paying lots of money for resilience of the power systems. And one of the interesting thing is EV as a battery, and they've been subsidizing V2H, V2G system, and I think the V2H and V2G system is already have a market in Japan, maybe not other places, but the potential of combining and PV and EV have a very strong maybe and decarbonization potential in urban area. We've been discussing about rooftop PV and EV, and these two things are really key getting into our city urban environment. And if we can combine these two, this decentralized energy system become almost perfect. We have so much energy storage within urban area, and also PV on the rooftop. And we've been doing the many researches and analyze many cities and found it can actually supply substantial amount of energy. Even like Kyoto City, like 70% of energy can be supplied by only these two systems. If all the roof area covered, 70% of the roof is covered by rooftop PV. And of course, this will really change how the power system is being operated. And I would like to ask, what kind of discussion, maybe you guys already discussing about the potential in Europe. I know that in Europe, V2G, have been gradually getting attention, and maybe Latin America, can start thinking about, like here, so much sunshine, and maybe EVs start getting into the system. And I would like to know about your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Maybe I can start and then you can follow. I'm also a big believer in V2G, so that's something that I'm really keen on, and I really believe in it for the future. I don't know in your models, but if we activate in energy planning models, if we activate V2G, it's always going to be taken to the maximum because it's capacity that's already paid for, storage capacity that's already paid for. Just to give an idea. I don't know for Colombia, but in Europe, average household consumption per day is 10 kilowatt hours, more or less. The capacity of, let's say, a large EV is 80 kilowatt hours, which means that with one vehicle, you can power your house for 1 week. And that's huge. So I really believe that it can help. It can also make the decentralized system more resilient. You can even imagine that if there is a grid failure, then you power your home with your car. It's not possible yet, but it could be in the future. Now it's going too slow. And why is it going slow? I think that there are different problems. The car manufacturers, they don't really want their vehicles to be used in bi-directional way. They're scared about their battery lifetime. So it's going very slow. In Japan, you had the CHAdeMO protocol, which was fine, but now we are going with the ISO 15, what was something. And it's not implemented in any car at the moment. So this protocol that allows for bidirectional charging. Some of cars are starting to do it, but it's going very slow. So yeah, I think it's going to take time, but I think there is a huge potential. And also, how do you do the pricing for that and the billing for a bidirectional charging session? That's also a big topic.
Brian?
Yeah, so in a sense, some of this is happening. You could, in the Danish system, the EVs are aggregated, and you would have a subscription to a service provider in your house, for example, where you have it plugged, and then this service provider would charge when it's a good idea. So that's the first thing. You need to have an infrastructure where you can decide to charge at the right time. If you're in a country where you cannot decide to charge at the right time, probably you cannot decide how to discharge. So this is rather important. Then I think it's important to say that when you buy a car, the purpose is mobility, and this kind of may prevent some of this. Of course, the service provider, you can tell them, I'm flexible within this time, and then they can do it. But I want to be able to drive to my work 7:30 tomorrow, and if it's not happening, I'm gonna to turn it off. I think it's a little overstated what this can do, and I also believe it can do something. And there are people who, in the Danish case, want to actually bid into a regulating power market, which you can if you aggregate it. But you have to understand that in most countries, the electricity consumption in a household is 1/3. And so that means that it helps in 1/3 of the cases. But then if you look into that, then probably more than half of that is not in a house where you can have it connected all the time. That actually creates a very limited possibility. So 2/3 is not in the household area of the electricity demand, which means you need a lot of other things, which then makes me think that Second Life or something else like this is maybe a more viable option. In my opinion, it's more important that they charge at the right time than to make them discharge. That it's more important.
Yes, I mostly agree with Sylvain as well. Just on the issue of, or one of the issues that maybe have to be addressed is cycling of the batteries. So something that you mentioned, if you just cycle batteries too much, they degrade, and then the cost of switching batteries today might be too expensive, and then maybe the second life alternative can be a solution. But we also need to consider that vehicles are parked probably 90% of the day. It's basically an asset that's not being used. It's sitting somewhere, and then if you have these parking facilities or load aggregators, and you don't use them one by one, but maybe as an aggregated battery, it can maybe be a better business opportunity. But I think the main critical thing here is just how you price it, so you can actually pay the cycling issue and ending the life of the batteries sooner. That's the main issue that should be addressed.
Vehicle to grid is something that depends very much on the life expectancy of the battery. Because if you're reducing the lifetime of your car, then this vehicle to grid is extremely expensive. And then second life battery actually makes sense. But that was the situation maybe 5 years ago, that your car battery would last around 300,000 kilometers. Now we are at 600,000 kilometers. So that means that the battery is going to last more than the typical car use. So I think that we are approaching the moment when vehicle to grid might make sense. But it will be an interplay of many different things. How many second life batteries we're going to have? What will happen with sodium batteries, which are much cheaper and have a huge potential for the price falling? So it's quite difficult to say. I wouldn't put my money on vehicle to grid or against it.
Last question.
Yes, hello. My name is Jarek Milewski from Warsaw University of Technology. Two things I would like to address. The one is this Danish map when we saw that is charging, but this I believe is charged from the nuclear power plant from Sweden probably, yes, during the night. But about the dark curve, I know the California the issue is like that the 60% of the prices are the negative during the day, but the final price for the customer are higher because they need to pay for the storage and then the supplier giving back the money from them. And do you have some future solution for this kind of or we should honestly speak to people like that, or in the future we can solve this issue somehow?
But you have the quotas which have very low final price, and it's like North Dakota, I think it's more than 100% wind now, and South Dakota is 70-80%. So California is a bit special case. But if you look at different US states, some of the high renewables states have low price. Texas, for example, which is 30% solar now, has very low electricity price. But maybe you can.
Yeah, I think. I mean, bad market designs is hard to fight against. So of course, if it's a zero price in a given quarter of an hour, now also in Poland, if that doesn't hit you as a consumer, probably there's a need to do something about how the market is designed and who is earning the money. It does not change the fact that it's a good idea and that it's cheaper. So I think we have to address problems in the right areas. As for how the Danish system works, we are simple tradesmen. So if it's a good idea to import, we import. If it's a bad idea to import and we should export, we export. That's the way it works.
All right. Thank you very much. It was an interesting session. The idea was to have some people to provoke this discussion and for you to continue discussing this thing of energy transition, the challenges, and how to go ahead further. You are a specialist. Perhaps some of you know more than anyone else, but that wasn't the case. The case was to provoke a discussion, and we are happy to have had it. And thank you very much for being here.